Moriden Athluan. Historians still seek to find out more about the mer whose actions ended the Fourth Era. Many are the tales that have been told of him, and most of them seem to contradict each other.
Most know him as the fabled Dragonborn of the Fourth Era, the savior of all Nirn, the mer who restored the lost dragon blood of the septim line of emperors to all Mandus.
Some insist that he was a cunning thief. More insist that he was a warrior without compare. Still, others argue that he was a mage of unrivaled power.
There are whispers that he was a slave to the Daedric lords. Some even claim, in tales told in the darkest corners of Skyrim, that he was a vampire lord.
Like all legends, there are bits of truth hiding among the embellishments and the exaggerations. No single telling of the legend matches any others. But there are some few things that are always the same. The truth, however. The truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Nine Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. When I woke and re-entered the common room, it was all I could do not to drop to my knees and give praise to Azura. The Stormcloak courier was standing right there, feet away from me. So naturally, I did nothing. I strolled to the fire near him, warmed myself one last time, then went outside to watch and wait. It was perhaps only an hour later that the courier emerged from the inn. To his credit, he wasted little time and left the inn at a dead sprint. I hadn't expected this, and my intended ambush position did me little good. Instead, I had to take a run myself, shadowing the Stormcloak as he ran the road heading back towards Windhelm. Finally, though, I was in a good position, caught my breath just enough to steady my aim, and took the shot. The courier barreled into the ground, rolling through the snow before coming to rest in a small patch of grass. It took a minute or two to make my way to the rapidly cooling corpse. I dragged it from the main road lest searchers find the body too quickly, and then searched him for the hoped-for orders. It didn't take long to find them. I stuffed them into my own pouch and began the walk back to the Imperial camp. I turned the captured documents over to Legate Rikke. She quickly perused them, frowning to herself at several points, while I waited for her direction. Eventually, she put them down with a thoughtful expression and said, almost as if to herself, that she was surprised at how aware of the Empire's plans the Stormcloaks appeared to be. I said nothing in return, mostly because I wasn't sure there was anything I could say. After a moment, she nodded to herself, and as she pulled out new papers and began to write on them, she gave me the information I needed. Fort Dunstad, the fortress ruin I've been going out of my way to avoid, has been taken away from the bandits that have been occupying it. Given its position on the main road and the fact that it is, essentially, the only fortified position in the hold, makes the fort a major military target. And the documents I had captured included a request for reinforcements. I will be delivering a new set of orders, ones that do not mention this little fact, ones that misrepresent the Empire's current plans and positions. In the guise of a Stormcloak courier, I will deliver these to the Stormcloak commander in Dawnstar. With the Stormcloak forces then pushed out of position by the misinformation, the Legion can then move in and take Fort Dunstad. At which point, Dawnstar will have little choice but to surrender to Imperial forces. A simple enough ruse for a simple enemy. It makes me wish I'd kept a uniform or two from the Stormcloaks to make the Actually, I think I know where I might be able to get one. After backtracking up the main road and acquiring some Stormcloak armor, I walked back into Dawnstar. The city was tense. The people know they are near the front lines of the fighting, and there was a feeling it was only a matter of time before the Legion crested the nearby rises and marched into Dawnstar. That didn't mean that everyone was in terror of it, of course. Several seemed more of the mood to welcome them. This was nowhere more evident than in front of the Jarl's longhouse, where the Jarl was casting dark looks upon 2 Legion veterans. One even wore his heavy Legion armor, which, honestly, was the source of the Jarl's ire. The Jarl will be watching them very closely, though not for long, I think. Assuming this works as planned. It was only at this point that I became very, very grateful for the fact that I had grown up in Windhelm and could imitate their ways of speaking and, more importantly, that Stormcloak armor covers up every part of exposed skin. Explaining why a dunmer was fighting for Nord supremacy might have been a little awkward. I reported to the Stormcloak commander in Dawnstar, and it was only as I announced myself that another set of possible risks entered my mind. Were there code words, passphrases, something I should know about the formalities of meeting a superior officer in the Stormcloak army that were different than the Legion's? All of these things could trip me up if I was unaware of them. But at this point, it was too late. My heart hammered in my chest, realizing that I was surrounded by Stormcloaks, and that if I had to fight my way out, the odds were not good. Luck, however, was with me. The Stormcloaks seemed very lax on matters related to security and formality, and the commander took my armor and put on accent as proof enough of my identity. He took the forged documents, reading them over carefully and chuckling slightly in relief. He mumbled his gratitude about reinforcements being on the way to Fort Dunstad and took careful note of the troop movements that Rikke had written in that had about as much resemblance to reality as Ulfric's claim of equality. Finally, he nodded to himself and told me he had no missives for the return trip. He handed me 5 septims, said I should go grab a drink at the Wind Peak Inn, and then head back to Windhelm for further orders. I gave a half bow to acknowledge the order, then left the longhouse with a long, shuddering breath. 10 Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. To keep the guys more or less intact, I was obligated to stay at the Wind Peak for the evening. I was careful not to show my face or skin. Indeed, I did my best to just rent a room and stay hidden in it. I was forced into one conversation with a Stormcloak sympathizer who kept asking about how things were in Windhelm. I was able to pass him off after a few tales based on what I had seen when last in the Palace of the Kings. But other than that, I was able to stay away from anyone who might notice the deception. I left well before anyone else rose from their drunken revelry, and as soon as the city was out of sight, I swapped back to my normal armor. It was a relief to get out of it, really. Not as much because of the rebel notions that lay behind it, but more because it didn't fit all that well. I'll have raw spots for a few days, in places I'd rather not think about. On return to the Imperial camp, I learned that Rikke and the Legion had not been idle. Most of the camp was empty, save for a few of the supply corps. They had all been sent ahead to prepare for the assault on Fort Dawnstar. As the legate explained to me, the deception would be discovered within the next day or two, when the next courier arrived in Dawnstar. We had until that happened to take the fort, and with that in mind, I was directed to make, with all possible haste, to a point on the northern part of the fort's location to meet up with others of the Legion, and to assault the fort. I made the best time I could, alternating between sprinting and walking to get my breath back, and arrived at the fort well before noon. The others were awaiting my arrival, having already confirmed that the other groups were ready to attack on our signal. Assured that I was ready, we wasted little time. A single flaming arrow rose into the air from one of our archers, and as one, we charged the gates. The surprise was as complete as we could have hoped for. Though the Stormcloaks put up a more valiant defense than I would have originally credited them with, it was clear that they were confused, demoralized, and had no idea how they were going to repel the sudden and unexpected attack. This is not to say it was a quick fight, nor a bloodless one for the legions. We lost several dozen loyal men and women in the fight. Compared to the Stormcloaks, however, it was relatively few. Over the course of an hour of fighting, we finally gained the walls, and once we had the archers up there, myself among them, the rest of the Stormcloaks quickly surrendered, rather than be shot by an enemy it could not hope to get to. It may also have helped that I used my force shout once or twice in the fighting, adding a new element of chaos to the mix. With the fighting all but over, the local commander gave me my orders to report to General Tullius in Solitude. With Fort Dawnstar now in Imperial control, the city itself will fall quickly, and my services are no longer needed for the fighting. I took the written report and began the journey back to the capital city of Skyrim. I have never had an opinion, one way or the other, on the Thalmor. I have heard other people's opinions, but never having actually interacted with them, I have tried to keep an open mind. It is not uncommon for the defeated to feel hatred for those who bested them in a war, after all. That said, what little I had seen was very much in accordance with the statements I'd heard. Today, however, their stock with me goes up slightly. When I heard the scream of the dragon behind me, I ran. No look back, no hesitation. I had already been in pitched combat once today, and the thought of taking on another dragon just didn't appeal in the least. Not alone, certainly. This is where the Thalmor come into it, as when a passing patrol of them saw the creature, they charged into battle against it. With assistance. Hopefully better assistance than what I got in Rorikstead. Perhaps we could take it down. Thalmor magic is indeed formidable. The creature landed early on in the fight, and the elves hit it with everything they had. Between that and my arrows, it went down quickly. They marveled at the beast. Clearly they had not heard the news yet that the dragons were returning. For my own part, I stayed well away from the corpse. Until the Thalmor left. As expected, the same process as the last two had already been starting. The chanting, the voices, the concepts swirling around. When I grabbed hold of a concept this time, though, there was a difference. I could not put a word to what the concept was. The dragon still burned down to bone in the matter of a few moments, but I had no new word to shout. If this continues to happen, then it may be that there are many other walls out there, each with a word, each which can be unlocked in my head when I kill a dragon. Perhaps. It is my best theory right now, and so far it fits the evidence. I turned back to the road and towards solitude. I was bone tired passing through the gates of solitude. In many circumstances I might ignore that and go directly to the general, but I have a feeling that he'd turn me back around through those gates as soon as we had finished speaking. I can't leave that quickly. Not and still be aware enough to survive on the roads. I stumbled into the skeever, got a room, and passed out. 11 Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. The meeting with the general was, as expected, brief. My efforts in the Pale have resulted in my promotion to Praetor. Again, there is no change in my responsibilities, and, now that I'm thinking on it, I haven't heard a whole lot on the discussion of pay. Or maybe that's what the 200 septums that Rikke gave me just before the Battle of Fort Dawnstar was. Well, it's a good thing I'm making enough from various things I've been finding on my travels to keep me going. Surprisingly, I've been given today to do with as I will. Tomorrow, though, I am to be on the road to the Rift, where once again Legate Rikke is waiting for me with new orders. No hints this time as to what we will be doing. If the rumors about Riften are true, however, it will likely take the form of some kind of underhanded scheming. Simple order swaps won't cut it there. The people in Riften are known to be sly and cunning. They'd expect something that simple. Well, whatever it is, that won't be my problem until I get there. Today, I will be working to better understand some of the skills I have been picking up of late. The two skills I have been trying to develop when I have the time have been smithing and alchemy. The former has been slow, to say the least. It takes time and materials. I've had a little bit of time, but materials have been far more difficult to get hold of between my lack of funds in general and the fact that most of the smiths haven't had a lot of spare to sell. That has left alchemy, where I have had a great deal more success learning to make my own healing blends, and their darker cousin, poisons. I talk about this because today, my drive to learn led me to learn and deliver dark news. And in a way, I blame myself for it being a thing, though I likely shouldn't. The Alchemist of Solitude had a daughter who signed up with the Legions, but she hasn't been heard from in some time. I approached Captain Aldous, who was reluctant to share any information about the private in question. Indeed, I had to make it an order to get the information. Aldous then gave me the news, which I had to pass on to a now grieving mother. Her daughter died while on a scouting patrol near Whiterun in the immediate aftermath of the Battle of Whiterun. She did not thank me for the news, of course. I can't blame her. Only the gods know if my actions, or lack of action, could have saved her from death. This was another reminder of the price of war. The price for my revenge. I had done what I could with my time, and still it was early in the day. I had no wish to remain in solitude after delivering the news I had, so I took to the roads. I wasn't sure where I would try to reach tonight. At that moment, it didn't matter, so long as it was somewhere outside of solitude. I passed over the Dragon's Bridge, my mind still in a whirl of conflicting thoughts. I had known in my head what the likely price of my pursuit of Ulfric Stormcloak would mean. When it's all just numbers, when there are no names or faces attached to those numbers, it is so easy to justify the actions. I wasn't directly responsible for the death of Private Morad, but seeing the real grief and pain on the face of her mother hit me somehow. Even so, the war would have come, with or without my actions, maybe later, but still inevitable. People would have died, perhaps not Private Morad, but others. And if I hadn't taken the actions I had, then still more pain and suffering would be spreading across this province. I had to make a choice. By the time I crossed the bridge, I had firmed my resolve. My cause was just. The cost was worth it. I would save my people and others from the predations and bigotry of the Jarl of Eastmarch, and no price at all would be too heavy, too much, too burdensome to bear. Like the river I was now leaving behind me, I cast off the guilt and the emotions, and left them on the side of the road to rot. They could do nothing but slow me down. I got to Rorikstead as night was falling and decided that this was far enough for the day. I planned to stop by Whiterun tomorrow to check on the city, talk to the Jarl. I didn't have a chance after the battle, and if I am to be a local noble, the ability to buy a home there might be something I would want, though I doubt I have the coin for it just yet. That isn't to say I won't in the near future, though. The pay from the Legion isn't much, but I'm starting to get the hang of bartering with tradesmen, and I've started getting better buy prices for some of the things I've either been making or finding. On top of that, well, to be honest, I am still tired from the events of the last few days. A more leisurely walk to Whiterun might be a good idea before I press on to Riften. By my best estimate, it will be a 2-day trip, one from Whiterun to Ivarstead and then another to Riften from there. If it ends up shorter, so be it, but I'd rather take it a little slower at the moment. 12 Hearthfire, 4th Era, 201. I noticed that the dragon skeleton had already been removed from the garden as I left Rorikstead. Not that I was surprised. That garden is important for the locals, I'm sure. I'm more curious where they dragged the thing and left it. Even aside from that, it's not exactly a small amount of labor. Some of those bones were massive. I can't imagine just picking one of them up and chucking it to the side easily. Ah, well. If I recall, I'll ask about it next time I go through. Speaking of remembering things, I suddenly recalled that there was something I could have done in solitude yesterday. I had completely forgotten to check with the Bard's College about Nakara's brother. Another wasted opportunity, but to be fair to myself, the war has been somewhat occupying my time and thoughts. I had been watching for smoke plumes as I approached Whiterun. I know it's been several days, but one can never be sure how long it takes to truly be certain a fire has been put out completely, especially when there are a great many of them, all demanding your immediate and undivided attention. I was therefore grateful to see that none such graced the skylines as the city came into view. From the distance, it even appeared that some of the damage had already been repaired, which was even more encouraging. That said, I was still wary. If the report that Aldous had given me about Private Morad was true, then the Stormcloaks were still in the area, and dangerous. My quick look around the city confirmed what I'd seen on my approach. Most of the damage was already repaired. The only noticeable repairs that hadn't been completed, or even begun, had me chuckling slightly. I had called it days before the battle. The Talos priest was conspicuously missing from the shrine, and his home was still a massive pile of broken timber and collapsed beams. If the zealot still lives, I will almost bet he is in the jail, still preaching to anyone who will listen. The trellis works around the new Gilder Green, and my, how it's grown already, is also still in disrepair, but given the priorities of the city, that isn't all that surprising. All in all, unless the Stormcloaks come back to visit again, the city looks to be in very good shape. I spoke with both the Jarl and Preventus, apologizing for the abrupt departure following the battle. The Jarl was forgiving, understanding that despite my title, my first loyalty is to the Legion and the Empire. We caught up on the events since then. Yes, Heimska is in the jail, and yes, he is still preaching, before he offered me the chance to own a home in the city as well, just as I'd hoped. And just as I'd feared, the price of the home was far, far beyond my means, for now. Since, though, it seems there is not exactly a line of people waiting to buy the place, Preventus told me he could hold it for me if need be. I almost told him not to bother, but, well, we'll see how things play out at the end of the war. I went down to the training yards behind Yavaska, and spent the afternoon working on my axe forms and building up more skill with my flames spell. Given how much I have been using them lately, more than I had ever anticipated, it only made sense to try to improve those before I walked once more to a combat area where I would be likely to need them.